Have you been intrigued by gliding? Watching YouTube videos? Wondering what does this sport cost? Surely it's expensive. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not anywhere near as expensive as you think it is. All that and more in this episode of Soaring Sisters. Welcome, Soaring Sisters, to another episode. As I said, we're going to be looking at the cost of gliding, particularly for those who've got no experience of gliding and wondering what does it cost. In this episode, we're just going to look at the basic costs of being a member of a club, what the hourly rates are, and those kinds of things. But I'm putting together another episode on what does it cost to own your own glider. But before we move on to this episode, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up and hit the bell notification to be notified of new episodes. All of these things help us to drive more traffic to this channel, which promotes the sport that we all love. And as I said, we're going to answer some questions about costs in this particular episode. Came out of a conversation again that happened on social media. I have another channel called Pilot Kimberly, in which I'm exploring my history of powered flight and the journey of getting my private pilot's license, which is a story in itself because I have quite a bit of flying experience in powered aircraft, which includes military tryout, but I didn't actually ever get my private pilot's license, despite many hours and quite a few of those in a tail dragger. So that's a really interesting story. So get on over to the Pilot Kimberly channel and check that out. But when I was talking on social media to a bunch of people who are getting their private or commercial pilot's license, I was talking about gliding as a way to reduce costs and keep your skills up during COVID. And I had a number of people convinced that gliding was really quite expensive. To be fair, one person did have an experience that indicated that it was really expensive because their only experience of gliding had been at Omarama in New Zealand, which at the time was a commercial operation, or at least the operation that they saw was a commercial operation. And yes, it is more expensive than most of the club operations that you'll encounter. So let's just find out exactly what does gliding cost. But before we do that, let's check out what our Soaring Sisters have been up to around the world. In a previous episode, I think episode 3, we met Harbin's Man from Monash University's Soaring Society. If you haven't seen that episode, go and check it out. But the news is that Harbin's has now soloed, so congratulations to her. I'm sure she's going to go on to great things in gliding. And while we're talking about solos, go and check out 13-year-old Sky, who soloed at the Soaring Academy, the Soaring Society of America. I'm sure Sky is really, really proud to have soloed at 13 years of age, and I know her parents are proud too. So go and check that out on social media. While this channel is not sponsored by anybody, I would like to point out this book, which I think you should definitely consider as a gift for the flying women in your life. It's called Australian Women Pilots, and I'm definitely going to get a copy for myself. As Matt Hall says, pass this book on to a young woman who has a dream. Who knows where she can end up? A little bit of news closer to home at Narromine. The Narromine Cup was first held in 1998 by Beryl Hartley and Chris Stevens as a way of introducing pilots to competition flying in a friendly, low-pressure environment. It's not actually a competition. No tasks are set by a task setter. The pilots choose the task for themselves for any given day. Now, Beryl is a stalwart in gliding, and anyone from Australian Gliding knows Beryl. And thanks, Beryl, for being behind that particular event. I'm bringing you some news today of a friend of mine from my old club at Bathurst, Dominique Brazier, who achieved her gold distance and diamond goal, flying 365 kilometres at that event at Narromine. Well done, Dominique. Great to see you achieve that. I know you've been working hard at getting to know your new glider, Juliet Echo. Congratulations. Let's also celebrate with Maria Ossinger-Meek, who after several years as Vice President has now been elected as President of the FAI Medico-Physiological Commission, or CIMP. Maria is a glider pilot and a physician. Her day job is in a geriatric clinic, something she balances between her roles as President of the Medical Board of the Royal Netherlands Aeronautical Association and as an aeromedical examiner for Europe Aerosports. She's a member of the rulemaking groups of EASA, representing general aviation, as well as participating in aviation medical assessments for the Ministry of Transport Board of Appeal in the Netherlands. So if you know somebody in gliding, one of our Soaring sisters, who deserves recognition, whether it's for solo, for a badge, or for work for the gliding community, then please comment below and we'll include them in the next episode of Soaring Sisters. Now on to those costs. So before we go ahead and explore the costs, let's talk about what's different between a gliding club and a commercial learn-to-fly powered school, because it's really important to understand that first. There are gliding operations that are commercial schools where you pay for an instructor's time, but most gliding clubs you will find are volunteer operations, so you don't typically pay for the instructor's time. That's the first thing. Now, what does that mean in terms of the operation? Well, it means that there's an expectation that you as a student will contribute to the operation of the club. So unlike your powered school where you arrive 5 minutes early for your 8 o'clock morning flight and leave at 9:05, it doesn't work like that in gliding. You'll be expected to contribute to the operation because it takes quite a bit to have the operation proceed, particularly so for winch clubs, but also for aerotow clubs. And we'll get to the differences between winch and aerotow as we go. Here in Australia, there's a real push now called Soaring to the Future to understand how we provide value to our clients, to our customers, who are the public who want to learn to fly gliders or come along for a single flight. And so there is a recognition that clubs have to be more professional and perhaps ask less of people in terms of their commitment in terms of time. But I think it's still important to understand that there is an expectation in a club operation that you will contribute to that operation as a student learning to fly. And there are very many ways that you can do that, and you can talk to your club about how you can do that, or your prospective club about how you can do that. So first of all, let's talk about the breakup of the costs. So when you go to your powered flying school, you're paying for your instructor's time and you're paying for the aircraft time. And those are usually combined into a single fee per hour for aircraft and instructor. Now for my particular flying, which is done in a Citabria under instruction, that's around about $375, $380 an hour. A Citabria here in Sydney would be around about that price, probably maxing out at about $400 an hour, depending on which school you went to. The cost of flying a Citabria solo is of the order of $275 an hour. You don't pay a membership to a club unless you're a member of an aero club, which means that you fly for a reduced cost typically. Nor do you pay typically any fee to any governing body, except of course the fees for medicals and all these kinds of things. It's not just an hourly cost when you're learning to fly, as we all know. There's quite a cost in terms of books and theory and exams and all the rest of it. And those costs are very, very reduced or nil in gliding. So what I'm going to talk about in gliding is the main costs, membership costs and per hour flying. The structure for gliding is that there is an overarching organisation. In Australia, that's the Gliding Federation of Australia. Now, it actually takes on responsibility for gliding operations under CASA's regulations. So it's still all governed by CASA in the end, but CASA defers some of the operational requirements to the Gliding Federation of Australia. So there's an annual fee for membership of that Gliding Federation, which is something like $320 per annum for an adult. And then there's your gliding club membership fee as well, an annual fee, something similar typically, depending on the club. Some clubs are more expensive because they have more facilities and access to better aircraft and that kind of thing. So do check out what your own club costs are. I believe the structure is similar in Britain. I don't know if there's an annual fee to the British Gliding Association or whether that's included in your club membership fee or whatever. So someone will comment below and we'll all know then. But typically the membership cost for a club membership in Britain is of the order of £350. So you can expect the cost to be very similar, 300 or 400 euros, that kind of thing in other places in Europe. So there's a federation cost, a club membership cost, and those are typically annual. And then there's the launch cost. So let's talk about the two main types of launch that you will see in Australia. There are others, but we won't talk about them in this video. There's winch launching and there is aerotow launching. Winch launching involves typically V8 powered, very large winch that pulls in several kilometers of cable and pulls the glider up at sort of 40-45 degree angle, just a lot like a kite. And it's a very fast way and a very inexpensive way to get a launch. Typically here in Australia, that launch with a winch would cost you about $15. I think it's about £8 typically in Britain. Aerotow, as the name suggests, involves connecting your glider to the rear of an aircraft. In Australia, that would typically be something like a Pawnee, an aircraft that was in the past used for crop dusting and has been modified to tow gliders. And the cost of that launch to 2,000 feet would be about $60, $59, $60, something like that. So if you go higher than that, for some training flights that you might be required to go higher, it might be $70 or something like that, $80, depending on how high you go. Some of your training flights where you're practicing emergencies, you'll need to go higher. So what else? You don't pay for the instructor, but you pay for the aircraft, and that might be something of the order of $1.10 per minute. It's always a per minute charge, so about $66 an hour typically for a modern two-seat trainer. So what that means in summary is that if you did 3 one-hour flights when you're training on any given day, your total cost would be about $380, which is equivalent to the 1-hour flight in the Citabria. So that should give you a bit of an idea of what the costs are like. So now let's talk about how you might go about learning to fly a glider. And what's the best way to keep your costs down and to learn quickly? Well, like all kinds of learning, it's best done in an accelerated kind of way. So there are clubs here in Australia and all around the world that run intensive gliding courses, and if you are thinking about learning to fly gliders and you have the option to take up one of those courses, that's the approach that I would recommend. 1, you learn faster. 2, it costs less. Often with those accelerated courses, some of the costs are combined. So we'll take a look at the example of one of my previous clubs, Bathurst, and what it costs for a 7-day intensive course. Now these courses are available at a number of clubs. My own club, Lake Keep It, has a 7-day-a-week operation all the time. That's a commercial operation in which they train lots of people, including people from parts of Asia. So go have a search around on the net for clubs in your area and see if they run those intensive courses and see what costs are involved. Some of the commercial operations you pay for an instructor. Most of the club operations you don't pay for an instructor, and you'll find some really good package deals. My other recommendation in terms of learning to fly gliders is the same as learning to fly powered. Save your money first, get it all together first, and go ahead and learn to fly when you've got the money saved. You're looking at about $2,100 to do the course that we looked at Bathurst. Save yourself $2,500. Once you've got that saved, go ahead and do your gliding. The other thing that I think it's really important to talk about in gliding is that gliding is an incredible sport, or soaring as we prefer to call it, is an incredible sport with lots of different facets, and you won't learn about a lot of those facets initially. You'll be too busy learning to fly. So going solo is just the first step. From that point, the learning really begins. If you want to fly cross country, you can develop those skills. If you want to race, you can develop those skills. If you want to do aerobatics, you can do that. You can learn to become an instructor, as I did. And there's plenty that you can do in gliding. So go ahead, do your course, and see where gliding can take you. Well, thanks for watching another episode. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope the information was useful. Don't forget to comment below with any information from your particular country, bearing in mind that I'm based in Australia, so I don't have access to information about the United States and other places. I did look online, but I couldn't find an awful lot, particularly for the USA. So please do comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Like this episode if you like the content, and be sure to share it with your non-gliding friends. I'm Kimberly Olsen. This has been Soaring Sisters. Bye for now.